This video is going to be about the odd multiple personality syndrome that the legal system has in many countries when it comes to weapons. The United States is notorious for being crazy, but I like pointing out other countries that are crazier. In Russia, flare guns were converted over to something that is decidedly never going to be a gun, even if it does basically use the base of what looks like a zip gun for firing a 22 caliber stinking bullet, which is what it's based on. That's the minimum size that they could come up with, that they could get the dies for, to put a primer on the back of a piece of aluminum and screw it together. But yeah, you can make it to where it fires a 22 caliber. That's fine. Oh, wait a minute, it's center fire. So unless you have a Velodog revolver pouch, you can't do it. Pretty good on them. Other designs like one I came up with, you have the flare gun, it's permanently sealed shut and you throw the cartridge back into it, was invented in the 1800s and was the original design by a vacuum cleaner company to make it to where you could never chamber a shotgun shell in it because there were too many cartridges that fit. Meanwhile, in the United States, you can get a flare gun, it's plastic, that'll let you chamber now available real shotgun shells that are short, 2-inch shells. Because that's totally not a stupid damn thing situation. Next thing. So many different gun cartridges will fit in the wrong gun and blow it up. Okay. So let's talk about some fun exemptions. Flare guns can be 105 caliber inner diameter, basically water pipe diameter. Flare guns. That's been reserved for flares for so long because it's really useless for firing a gun. Nobody really wants to fire a 4 gauge anymore. They're not used for anything other than shooting large numbers of birds that normally don't congregate in that way anymore, and it's against the law everywhere, so nobody really needs them, and they weren't really any fun to shoot. They're fun to set off for effect, but nobody really wants to hit anything with them. Unless you're a punter and shooting a lot of birds that are garbage. So that became the default flare gun size, about that long, and it could shoot parachutes. But for little ones that are a little more convenient, the United States government allowed for a 12-gauge shotgun pistol. Yeah, 12-gauge Derringer, but it's plastic. And it had a rule that it had to have a 2-inch limit to the shell because shotgun shells below 2 inches were considered non-lethal. And then some bright boys came up with, hey, let's make some really short shot cards to make it to where we can pack more punch in a standard cartridge this big. Well, then you can do the same thing to the 2-inch, and suddenly now you have a lethal round that'll fit in a flare gun. What to do? Well, let's see what happened in Canada, the enlightened, perfect place where no shootings ever happen and everyone's just a little bit above average. The Lake Wobegon country. They forgot to dot their I's and cross their T's and legally permitted, without restriction, the ownership of 12-gauge pistols that are full-on, dead-ass 12-gauge pistols. There are 5 or 6 of them in the entire country. They're unregulated, and they're grandfathered immediately at birth. Really were last time I checked. And they're basically the same as the Desicata in the island countries, such as the Philippines, that are literally 12-gauge pistols that are called wrist breakers. Or the ones in India that are called Desicata, where they're wrist breakers. Well, I'm sure no other extremely enlightened, better than the United States country would ever do something incredibly dumbass. So let's talk about France letting you have, without any real permits, I mean, there aren't any permit requirements at all, for you to own a dead-ass, full-on 12-gauge pistol. Yeah, they did that. And not only that, they thought they were using non-lethal weaponry in it because you could only chamber a 2-inch shell. It's not like you can get a little Fiochi slug shell. But they made it rubber ball based. But then they found out, much to their not-so-amusement, that if you get within 6 feet of a person, you can put a hole in their heart with it very easily and consistently. So consistently that it should be recalled. Safety issue. It's supposed to knock a person down, not knock them dead. In France, the length of a cartridge for 12-gauge varies just as much as in the United States, but they decided to reserve the length of the cartridge at 2 inches, or 50 millimeter, or 1250 in this case, 12/50. This for the unusually short length that prevents you from being able to put a real shotgun shell in it so it won't blow up. Except that they didn't require it to be exclusively non-metallic. Enter the world of zinc and aluminum shotgun pistols. That sounds as stupid as it seems, but you'll find out. They made a personal defense exemption The United States has a sporting exemption. They have an exemption for sporting, shooting targets, shooting clay pigeons, hunting, and a self-defense exemption. If you make a self-defense only weapon, a weapon that's not really useful for shooting a target because it's too short of a barrel, pistol length, and it's not rifled. That's right, it's an unrifled fucking short barrel shotgun pistol. All they required is that you make it to where it is safe for the user firing it, and it's low likelihood of killing somebody. And it can't take hunting cartridges because they don't want you to be able to take hunting cartridges and put it in a pistol because then it's not good for hunting. They don't want somebody shooting while hunting and indiscriminately shooting people. And it had to have something in it that would be less likely to kill a person. And their designation was 21 feet like everybody else. 21 feet is the master distance for being attacked because you have only enough time to fire. Below 21 feet, you don't have enough time to shoot, is the presumption. Shotguns using lead shot are prohibited for sale and possession without certain permits and rules. By definition, by default, they're excluded. But you're not legally excluded from getting a hold of the ammunition itself. And now you have an aluminum 12 gauge that you can fire. And you didn't have to have a permit. All you have to do is prove that you're a French national, because it's a French law. And you have to have a permit for hunting, sporting, or whatever, or just get a note from your doctor saying, I'm not mentally ill or physically incapable of taking the recoil. Self-defense rubber projectile, less lethal cartridges. Unleaded variants. Legal category D ammunition, for sale to adults, subject to registration and prohibited to import now, but for a while it wasn't. $147 for the gun. There's a double barrel over and under 12 gauge pistol. They literally made one. It's exactly what you think. So, rubber bumps, blocks, balls, or slugs called Gomm, C-O-G-N-E, Gomm, Gomm. Rubber ball defense pistol, defense only pistol. The GC-54 has a double barrel. The GC-27 is a single barrel. Their Category C weapons cannot be sold outside of France, but people put them on eBay anyway. They just put them on as flare guns because they used the same standard as American flare guns, legally speaking, because they're made the same way, even though it's a material that would make them legally restricted in the United States if you said what it was made out of or answered anybody if they ask. You could almost get away with. I could order. It's $150. It's no different than a flare gun, but it's metal. Most of them. Some of them are plastic only, because it says right on them you can't fire the rubber buckshot. In France, it requires an identity card and a medical certificate saying that there's nothing otherwise wrong with you. You have to be in perfect health, and there has to be no outstanding issue with you. If there's ever been any issue, you're excluded, but you can request that it be removed. You don't have to have a permit, but if you have a clay pigeon permit, hunting permit, or a target shooting permit, you're okay with it. It just means you've already gone through a class. And you can just take a class. It just says you have a certificate. The certificate or license is just that you've passed a test for it. Category D ammunition can have up to 18 grains or 1.2 grams, actually 19 grains, excuse me, or 1.2 grams of propellant. Emphasis added. Or grain equivalent to gunpowder? No, they said grains, so you can put pistol powder in it if you wanted to. Well, those would be blanks. Yeah, but there's enough room in the thing for you to shove something in there with it. Then there's the Luxe, or Luxe, revolver looking single-shot plastic shotgun, overbuilt. It's got enough material to keep it from popping open. That has a nice extractor. And you can change out the barrel entirely and put in the 9mm 5-shot revolver cylinder in it, and it'll work. So you have a 9mm. But it can only use plastic rounds, right? It's actually 8.8 millimeters, so nobody would ever just take the plastic cylinder and drill it out and put in metal liners. And swappable aluminum, zinc, or plastic barrels, actions, and bodies. So where did they get the design from? They copied a flare gun from the United States. It's identical. The only thing they changed is they made the barrel longer and give it a much more gentle forcing cone than you would ever see in a normal gun, so it does a good job keeping the shot where it's supposed to go. Effective range is 45 feet. Self-locking break action single action gun, or a double action for the double barrel, or a revolver one that is actually double action for firing literal 12 gauge shotgun shells. It's 1.4 inches thick, 5 inches long, and high, and it's 8.66 inches long, so it's longer than a flare gun. It looks more interesting. I saw someone selling it on the French eBay, selling one of the flare guns from the United States as one of them by spray painting it. The commentary under it was funny. Maximum effective range is 15 meters or 45 feet. But let's see what happens when you fire this non-lethal 12-gauge single-shot handgun ammunition at various distances. Anyway, it's called the SAPL standard, or a company that's named after it. The first one we're going to analyze or reveal about is a is the 12-pellet hard rubber buckshot mini Gomm cogne MGC. 37 foot-pounds, 85 grains, 400 feet per second, 440 feet per second. At 2 meters, it breaks ribs 100% of the time. At 1.5 meters, it penetrates the skin to perforate it and breaks 1 to 2 ribs again. Usually it's 1 rib fracture otherwise. At 2 meters, it causes lung injuries, lung penetrative injuries, and the wad gets stuck in your chest. At point-blank range, all the way down to this far, 4 ribs will break on impact because of the spread pattern just being big enough, lacerating heart and aorta, causing immediate death. So that got a little bit regulated, right? No. You just had to get a permit. So when people were told that they'd have to get a permit to buy it, people just bought them up in boxes and started selling them on the black market. What was the other one? Oh, this was a slug. What did the slug do? Well, it's 100 grains, 18.5 foot-pounds. Looks like about half, doesn't it? 280 feet per second. Rubber slug, called the FUN-TIR-FT, or Funter. Less than 2 meters away, it'll break ribs, 1 or 2 of them, guaranteed. Lethality? No. There were protests in France, and another one that was like this was used, and the police had to switch over to one that used a 2-inch ball. 2 inches. Bigger than your eye socket, because they caused blindness or death in a couple of people. The reduced wounding power weapon is the preferred term now, but that takes up too much space in advertisement copy, and people are selling flare guns as replacements. It's too dangerous to be marked as a non-lethal weapon, like a sandbag or something. So, yeah. So what are they doing instead? They're using literally grenade launchers and just shoving giant, dead-ass 200 caliber shotgun shells in it, hitting people with squash balls. So anyway, when I saw France legalizing briefly and not being willing to say maybe we should unlegalize them, 12-gauge pistols that will literally do what you think they do. And when I complain about the ATF being whiny and not letting us Americans have a self-defense standard, would be a lot like this. You would have a neck-down cartridge that would make it to where you can't ever fit anything into it other than this, and shoot, from let's say a shotgun shell size down. Oh, wait a minute, someone would just put a short shell in it and let it shoot through it and hope for the best. Yeah. You can easily make in the United States a pistol that fires up to 50 caliber. So you can literally build your own 50 caliber break action pistol. There's nothing legally wrong with it. It just has to be rifled. But wanting to have a lower power alternative like this, obviously it would be the big squash ball or the little one. The U.S. government will not have an exemption for self-defense, a self-defense or self-protection weapon. But you can seriously dead-ass build a shotgun pistol if it's a 45. If you just say, if it's a 410, if you just say it's made for 45 Colt. I thought Canada was crazy. I knew the ATF was crazy. But French, they're batshit crazy. $120. And when I hit the buy it now button, it didn't give a shit that I'm in the United States. I obviously closed the window because that's an insta felony, more than 10 years, because I'm importing, acting as an importer, a 12-gauge pistol made in France. There's another one from Italy. But at least that one's all plastic. Thanks for watching. Good day. Good luck.